over the weekend, Bob Ferguson officially went from exploratory campaign for governor to official campaign for governor. He had 3 different campaign kickoff events across the state. One of them was in the city of Seattle. He was surrounded by the who's who of Washington politics. We'll get to more on that in a moment. But this was the tweet from the Seattle Times about it, which I found to be very, very telling about the state of things and where Washington is at, and one of my chief complaints about the state of things. Governor Jay Inslee on Saturday endorsed Attorney General Bob Ferguson in next year's race for governor, hand-picking him early from a competitive Democratic field as his chosen successor. And I couldn't help but notice the specific word choice from the Seattle Times, hand-picked, chosen successor. And that language to me really is less reminiscent of a democratic election than it is of a coronation of a king. And this has been, I think, one of my primary concerns. And it, I think, is the single biggest issue that drives my votes, that drives my opinion on some of these issues. And that is, this is what happens when we allow one party to have complete political control for so long. They do get to coronate a governor. They do get to choose who is going to be the next in line to take these positions. And you might say, well, Brandi, and I mean, voters have put them in that position, and that's true. However, it is the Democratic Party deciding at the end of the day which Democrat among the field, because there isn't just one, is going to be the one to get the job. And they are circling the bases around Bob Ferguson, and they are going to make sure that it is him. We'll talk about his Democratic challengers coming up in a moment. But again, this is what we're fighting against on the show. I could not care any less what party it is. What I care about is that it's one party, is that we've got a uniparty in Washington state, and I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that results in the best ideas. I don't think it results in the best dialogue, in the best discussions, in the best problem solving, and we've had one party in control for far too long. And we see the results of that. We are not living in a better state today than we were 10 years ago. We are simply not. I don't know who by any measurable standard would say that we are. And so here we have, a year and a half out from the 2024 election for governor in this state. And again, you have Bob Ferguson, who really, and I watched some of the interviews he did after this, he believes the job is his. I mean, he truly believes the job is his. And so then you've got all the other Democrats circling the bases around him. Is that circling? It's not circling the wagons. Nicole's like, circling the wagons. Sometimes I'm really bad at these little sayings. Circling the wagons. And look, fine. They want to be close to power. They believe it's him. I'm going to fight like hell from now until November of 2024 to make sure that it's not him. And I would say it's less personal about him in particular than it is about having yet another Democrat in that office to complete the Democratic trifecta in Olympia once again, and to be just another Democrat in office in that job in the last 40 years. And so, this is kind of predictable, but I had to laugh at one thing. Nicole, you got the video of so this was just posted on Bob Ferguson's Twitter account, and it shows everybody cheering for him. Go ahead. Let's go, Bob! Let's go, Bob! Let's go, Bob! Welcome, everybody. Well, that was lame. But a couple moments from that video I just have to point out. One is the people who are standing behind him. Dow Constantine, if him being there isn't enough to make you not want to vote for Bob Ferguson, I don't know what isn't. But you've got Congresswoman Susan Del Bene, you have Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and I believe, although I can only see a tiny sliver of their face, that is Christine Gregoire, isn't it?
That's what I thought, too.
I'm
so
pretty sure.
So.
I'm going to say that with 99% certitude, only seeing 1/3 of her face, that's former Washington Governor Christine Gregoire, which really bums me out. Because she's been working since she left office to try to bring common sense back to city government in Seattle and push back against some of the crime issues and police defunding and all of that. And I'm like, well, why would you support this guy for governor? We got to try to get her back on, because I've always liked her.
Okay.
I've always liked her. I've always had good conversations and interviews with her, and that bums me right the heck out. But anyway, there was one other thing in particular that it has got me gleeful. So not infrequently when I post a picture at an event or something, and if there's like 90% white people there, or it doesn't even have to be, if it's like 50% white people, it doesn't matter. on Twitter, people like the far left activists who hate me on Twitter will be like, oh, looks like a Klan rally or something like that. Like, oh, Brandi only has white friends. It could be a picture I send out with a group of just a couple friends. I had a dinner party once for early supporters of the show, and there was like everybody there except one person was white, and they're like, oh, Brandi's a racist and all this. Without fail. I don't tend to count the number of white people and people of color when I walk into a room and make sure that it's proportionate to the population, because I tend to think that's a little bit racist and a little bit fake and a little bit overboard. But anyway, so I saw this. This is just a screen grab from a King 5 camera that was there with Bob Ferguson. So now this isn't particularly surprising. I couldn't help but notice that, there's the rainbow of races behind him, right? It's like, oh, it's a very diverse group of supporters cheering him on. I see King County Councilman Gurmai Zahalai, who we had on Sundays with Subscribers a couple weeks ago. I mean, really on stage behind him, which is going to be what people see on television. Really, diversity is what they are exuding there. And then I couldn't help but notice when the camera panned and it went to the crowd of people who just showed up, they're like all white. They're all white. And had that been a crowd for me, people would have been like racist. But the thing that, and again, I don't care if every person in the crowd is white. I don't count. I don't usually take those things into consideration. But what I think this illustrates is the obsession with identity first, is that is the crowd that naturally came. Mostly white people, mostly old white people for that matter. But the crowd that they handpicked to put right behind him for the cameras was young, old, all different races represented behind him. But that's not what was represented naturally of the people who actually showed up. And that's why it's all so contrived. It's all so contrived. Again, I don't care the race of the people who support Bob Ferguson, but you see how forced it is. And he was at an event the other day where I pointed out on Twitter, I retweeted some pictures that he'd posted. And I was like, if I had posted these exact pictures from an event I was at, the Twitter mob would have been out in force. Like, oh, that's a Klan rally. They're all white and old. All the people in this picture were older. I'm not going to vilify anyone or like, sorry.
I know the first time you said old.
Older. And they were all white. Every one of them. But it's okay when it's Bob's crowd that's all white, but when it's my crowd, it's not. And it just shows, like, you just have to not care about these things. But I thought it was interesting just how forced that was when you looked at who showed up versus who was behind him. So speaking of obsession with identity, Hillary Franz is another Democratic candidate for governor, although the uniparty is going to push her aside. They're going to push State Senator Mark Mullet aside because it's got to be Bob Ferguson. That's who we've chosen. That's who we're planning to coronate for the job. Hillary Franz, we've been trying to get her on the show. Hillary Franz and I have had a wonderful relationship. I mean, I used to go out to wildfires all the time. I'd have her on my Fox 13 show all the time. But I really think she doesn't want to be associated with our show. I think she's trying to get the progressive vote, which is weird because Bob already has it. And I think she's like, well, whereas Mark Mullet, he's trying to get moderate, reasonable people. He doesn't care what political party they usually vote for. So he'll come on whenever we ask him to come in. And Hillary, I think she's really, because there's no other reason to be ignoring us in that way, except she thinks that, we're too far to the right? It's like, how do you think you're going to win? Bob's got all those voters. But she is, I think, of all the candidates as of late, she's disappointing me in her campaigning, because had you told me like a year ago, who do you like for governor? I would have probably said Hillary Franz would have been a top choice, because she's someone who recognizes the challenges of the eastern side of the state. She's shown up for a lot of communities. I've spoken to farmers and ranchers who really don't agree with her politics or her political party, but they appreciate the things that she's done for them. And so I think she should have ran on that. She should have ran on her love for the outdoors, the time she's spent in these communities during some of their worst crises around wildfires, etc. And that would have been a lane for her to carve out that was unique. Instead, what did she do right away? She jumped into calling Dave Reichert right wing and MAGA this, MAGA that. When Trump was indicted in New York, she from her, and she's the commissioner of public lands, she put out some press release from her official account about, responding to the Trump indictment. It's like, what? Why? Well, nobody cares. So she's totally leaning into the tried and true lazy Democratic playbook, which has been disappointing. And she continues to now, and this is not the first time that she's focused on this, campaign on what aspect of her identity do you imagine she's campaigning on? the fact that she's a woman. She tweeted out, and this came, I think it was about simultaneous when Bob's official announcement was coming down. She said, anything I've ever done, whether it was running for city council or state lands commissioner or my law career, I've been told to sit quietly, wait my turn, and let the men ahead of me have theirs. Yeah, first of all, I think I cut off part of her tweet. I think there was, can you look, Nicole? I think there was more to her tweet. Go to her account, see if that's there. But I think then it was just something like, I've never listened. Okay, first of all, does anybody, I'll take things that didn't happen for 500, Alex, because there's just no way that anyone told her, sit quietly. Oh. What did she say?
After that, it says, never stopped me.
Never
period.
Stopped me. Yeah, sorry, I cut that off. I don't know why. Does anybody really think she was told during any of that, run for city council, state lands commissioner, law career, sit quietly, wait your turn, let the men ahead of you have theirs? No, she was never told that. Nobody ever told her that. But this is the second time now that she's leaned into taking one of the most uninteresting aspects about her, the fact that she happens to have female parts. I say it that way because, and whenever I talk about like skin color, I always talk about skin pigmentation, these immutable characteristics, things you cannot change, things that you were born with. They're, to me, the most uninteresting aspects of someone's qualifications or who they are. It's just so strange. And that's what she's chosen to focus her campaign on, other than aspects of her career that I actually think are very interesting from a Democratic candidate. Now, I still think she'd be better than Bob Ferguson, but this sort of stuff has me so... I turned off at the way that she's running her campaign. But anyway, and we have a jam-packed show when it comes to identitarianism and why it truly is, I think, one of the single biggest poisons that's facing our country right now in politics is this obsession with identity at all costs. So anyway, Bob Ferguson, the Democratic Party has officially started its campaign to coronate him. They really don't think that there's any chance he won't be governor. And I've been clear, I think it's probably pretty likely. That being said, I think Dave Reichert has as good of a chance as any Republican has ever had in the last 40 years to win. I'd like to see him out and about campaigning a little bit more. He's been campaigning quietly. I don't think... silence is much of a strategy. And so but here's the thing. Dave Reichert wins elections. He has won elections. He's won elections in King County. So I guess, who am I sitting here? I don't think he's always been much of an out and about campaigner, but I hope that they've got some tricks up their sleeve to point out the obvious problems with Bob Ferguson as candidate. Doesn't mean he has to get nasty. I don't want him to get nasty. I don't like nasty campaigns. But I think he can run on his record in a way that draws direct contrast in a more in-your-face way to what Bob Ferguson has said and done. And we'll have more on what Bob Ferguson has said, done, and not done coming up later on in the show. All right, but speaking of sort of this uniparty, which again, that's my primary concern. I don't want one party to have control of everything. That's just terrible. That makes no sense. It's the worst possible thing that could happen for we the people.